I'm Chance Dorland, and this is the Spurs Insider, our weekly NBA podcast from ExpressNews.com, brought to you today by the law offices of Thomas J. Henry. As always, I'm joined now by San Antonio Express News Spurs beat reporter Jabari Young. Jabari, sometimes when we talk about the Spurs, which I guess is every week, we have a little bit of good news, a little bit of bad news. Not the greatest news today to report, so let's just break into it. They've been having some fourth quarter woes. They blew leads to the Pelicans and the Lakers, now on a 2-game losing streak. So I guess the question is, who's to blame? Is anyone to blame?
You know what? I don't think it's necessarily anybody to blame. I just think that it's everything that the Spurs have been going through the entire season is caught up to you. You know, there are some teams that can overcome injuries and injuries to key players and continuity issues and just, you know, guys coming in and out of the lineup. And then you reach that point of an 82-game season that it just catches up to you. And I think right now it's catching up to the Spurs where you see, and Pau Gasol, I thought he hit it beautifully after the Spurs lost to the Lakers, blew a 17-point halftime lead, second half lead, 13-point fourth quarter lead. And they said, you know, listen, you know, when it's raining, when it rains, it pours, and it's pouring right now on us. But they're missing those guys that they usually rely on to get them a basket when they need it. LaMarcus Aldridge, who, you know, can get you a basket on that left block, right block. Kawhi Leonard, who has the ability to create his own shot. You know, I think Rudy Gay is a guy who was there, but at the same time, you know, he's just coming back off of injury, and I know that he feels more than capable of doing it. But I mean, at the same time, you know, it's like, these are the issues that catch up, the continuity, the injuries to key players, and it's caught up to them to a point now where you need, you know, your best players, especially this time of the season. You need them on the court. You need them there because right now the Spurs are drowning, and they're drowning in their own, you know, rain. And it was raining in San Antonio on Saturday before that Lakers game, Chance, and as I said, it must have been a hole in the AT&T Center because some of that rain got on them, and it's hurting them right now. And they had to enter, you know, Monday's contest. You know, our podcast we played after Monday's game as a must-win before they go on this 3-game road trip, which we talk about in a minute. But execution in the fourth quarter comes down to chemistry. It comes down to continuity. It comes down to big-time players making plays. And right now the Spurs are just they're void of that. They don't necessarily have it. I mean, they have a core group of veterans who can make plays, but at the same time, they need guys who can get the bucket, who can make plays. They need their star players. They need LaMarcus Aldridge and Kawhi Leonard, and you know they didn't have those guys.
So obviously they're still looking for some of the star players that they're losing, so that they're missing right now. So this upcoming road trip you just mentioned, must-win games. Obviously, it'd be great to win, but do they have to win? And then, do you want to try to predict the record? Is it not a good prediction at this point?
Yeah. Well, you know what? Listen, I said, you know, this can be another 3-game losing streak. You're going up against 3 of the top-tier teams in the West, 3 of the teams that – there's only 4 teams that people really think can get out of the West, right? There's the Golden State Warriors, obviously, Houston Rockets, Oklahoma City Thunder, and if Kawhi Leonard comes back, then I think the Spurs enter that conversation. If not, then, you know, there'd be another team. Well, I think it would be at that point, I think it would be 3 teams. But the Spurs, some way, somehow, have to find a way to win 2 of these 3 games on the road. I mean, there's just no other choice. They have to find a way because you have to stay afloat. You can't afford to go on another 3-game losing streak. Now, I know there's still a lot of basketball to be played. I know there's, couple of team games left. But you can't lose traction. Remember something. You lose, that doesn't mean other teams are going to lose too. They're winning, you're losing. All you're doing is slipping. You're killing yourself. So, you know, this is an epic 3-game trip. They got to find a way to win 2 games. You know, I don't know how they're going to do it. I know the odds are stacked against them. I'm not counting them to win on Thursday in Golden State, although I think it'll be a good sign if they were to at least go into that game, even if it's without their best player in Kawhi Leonard, even if LaMarcus Aldridge doesn't play, if they find a way to stay competitive in that game. Don't get blown out, because the last time you were up there, you had a lot of good things that occurred for you. So they got to find a way to stay competitive in that game. They might lose, but losing is not necessarily everything all the time. It's about being competitive. It's about staying within striking range of the Warriors, at least for a certain amount of time. You know, you're not going to always do that because, you know, when they're starting to hit shots, you know, it's just going to be hard. But you have to find a way to beat Oklahoma City. And you have to find. Now, I know 2 games is asking a lot. You got to find a way to win one. You can't go 0-3 on this trip. I just don't think you could do it. And so you just have to find a way to win at least 2 games and at the bare minimum 1. And if you can do that, I think you should feel a little bit. And not only do that, but stay competitive in all of these games. Now, listen, if the Spurs lose all 3 of these games, but let's say they lose by 2 points here, 3 points there, another 2 points there. Okay, fine. I'm cool with that. That's not bad. Because at that point, that's showing me that you're at least competitive against these teams. They have their best players. You may be down yours when we still don't know yet. But if you're staying competitive, that at least gives you some hope coming back home on your home court that, hey, we just got off of this 3-game road trip, and we were competitive against 3 of the better teams in the West. We should feel good about ourselves. Should we be happy? Absolutely not, because we lost the game. But we should feel good and we should feel confidence knowing that when we're whole, when we have all of our pieces in play, we can give them all we've got. And all we've got might mean comes down to a Game 7. So you just can't go on this trip and get blown out. You cannot go on this trip and have these three teams send you a message like, hey, y'all ain't nothing without Kawhi. If he ain't on the court, y'all can't beat us. You can't let that be the message. You can't let that be the theme. And if it is, then the Spurs are in more trouble than I thought. I thought they were in trouble coming off of that Pelicans loss and the Los Angeles Lakers when they bloomed fourth quarter leads to teams that they're supposed to beat. Because if everybody's saying, oh, well, they didn't have Kawhi, they didn't have DeMarcus, well, guess what? New Orleans Pelicans didn't have DeMarcus Cousins, who's out for the season. Los Angeles Lakers didn't have Brandon Ingram. So they were missing players too. Everybody's missing guys. That can't be the excuse. You got to be competitive on this 3-game trip. And if you lose all 3, make sure that you're competitive. Make sure that you look at the score and you say, man, damn, the Spurs got blown out. No, that can't be the narrative. You got to win 1 game, or I hope the Spurs should hope they should get 2 games on this trip, and if not 1. But if not, if all of that fails, if you can't get a game, stay competitive. Because if you lose 3 games and you get blown out on all 3, good night.
Good night. All right. Well, that's a definitive answer. So we've talked about the near future. Even if you're going to lose, make it close, or hopefully get 1, get 2. That would be great. Let's talk some Kawhi Leonard. We have had a roller coaster.
Everybody wants to know.
Yeah, Jabari. And I like the way you put it in last week's episode. You're like, Express News said it first. We said it first and no one cared. What's going to happen with Kawhi, do you think? Is there anything new compared to last week? Is a return near? Because we just had this roller coaster with Greg Popovich saying, well, I'd be surprised if he comes back. And then almost, not immediately, but almost immediately thereafter, it's like, oh, well, he's back in San Antonio. And there's all this talk of him maybe coming back. So what? I don't even know what to say at this point. What do you think?
I've said before, and I'll continue to say it, that I think, I've said it will be the first, 2 weeks of March. From what I was hearing, everything I was told that were the target dates, or that time frame, I should say. And now we are approaching, if you don't count last week, because March, February was just here last week and March is entering its first full week of the month, then you would say between now and next week, right? At that point, you're entering, your true home stretch, because, you go on this 3-game road trip to start the month off. And then after this, then you're home, about 5 games, and of which that 5 games, it's not going to be easy either. You got New Orleans again. You have Minnesota, even though they're without Jimmy Butler. You have Golden State, and you have a Washington team that at that point, John Wall could possibly be on the verge of returning. And then you have a strong Utah team that beat you not once, but twice. They ain't scared of you. Utah, look, bring on the Spurs. We're not scared of them. We know we could beat them. And then you got to go back on the road against Milwaukee. You got to go against Washington. And then you got to see Oklahoma City and Houston again. So make no mistake, this month ain't easy. It's hard. But, again, I said between the first and second week, so let's say that this week is out of the question. And let's say for some reason, he wants to give it another week. Then I will put him on course, because after the Spurs play the Houston Rockets on Monday. They have a back-to-back on Tuesday. So maybe you're talking about that Tuesday against the Orlando Magic. Maybe you're talking about that Thursday against the New Orleans Pelicans. Hell, even Saturday maybe against the Minnesota Timberwolves next week. But my thing is this. If it gets beyond that, I think you're just playing with fire. I wouldn't even say playing with fire. I think you push in a little bit. And on our SA Sports Nation show, our guest host David Chancellor says something that's very key, and I thought about this all night. And if people recall, in 1994, 1995, Michael Jordan, arguably the greatest player that ever played the game in some people's eyes, came back after a brief semi-retirement. And he played 17 games for the Bulls, and the Bulls went 13-4, those last 17 games, made it to the playoffs, obviously. Beat the first round, Charlotte Hornets, and then they lost to the Orlando Magic in the second round. It was clear that Michael Jordan wasn't where he's supposed to be at. Even the great Michael Jordan couldn't shake off that rust, couldn't shake off that you put him back in the fold, but still it took some time to get that continuity back in order. Even the great Michael Jordan in his prime at that point needed a whole offseason, a whole season to regain that form. And obviously, next season he came back and they won 3 championships in a row after that point before he retired again. So it's like, I believe I'm not necessarily counting against them, but if it gets beyond next week and that March 15 range, I don't know how you piece it together at that point, because then you're asking Kawhi Leonard to come back, play about 10 to 15 games, something like that, and be ready by the time the playoffs roll around. And at that point, who knows where the Spurs are going to be seeding-wise, because if they keep dropping games to teams that they're not supposed to lose to, especially on their home court, then they could be anywhere from 6th to 8th. So at that point, you're putting yourself up against possibly going against a team in the first round. I don't know if they're going to fall that far, but after that Lakers game, they were 6th, and they were lucky, because if the Oklahoma City Thunder lost in Portland, they'd have fell to 7th, the Spurs would have. So they're right now walking on thin ice, and they got to get it together. But like I said, man, it's just these 2 weeks are going to tell me a lot. If he's not back by this week or next, I don't necessarily know if he should come back at that point. And so, like I said,
that's my question. The follow-up here is that if he can't make it back into that timeline, that just real strict timeline, just for sake of argument, if it's like a week later or however many days later, do you even do it, or do you say enough's enough?
I wouldn't. Now, I wouldn't. If I'm the Spurs, if I'm Kawhi Leonard, if I'm both camps, I wouldn't, because at that point you're just asking him to come back and listen, the man's competitive, and I know he's competitive as all can be. But at that point, I don't know what it's for. If you're going to get back and the continuity isn't there, you're not gelling in time. It's just, I don't know. It feels too, like, I'm not saying risky, because if he comes back, he says, I'm 100%, I want to give it a go. Fine, go ahead. But at that point, it's like you still need time to get it together. Like, I don't want people to feel like Kawhi is just going to step back on the court and all is going to be right with the world. No, that's not how this works. The man needs time to get himself back. You need time to you need games under your belt, to get yourself back in order. And at that time, and these aren't just teams that, hey, we're going to play against a bunch of bum teams and let you get yourself back. No, these are teams that are still fighting for something. So when you come back, they're not just going to say, oh, man, Kawhi's back. Let's go lay down. Let's forfeit. Hell no. They're going to try to bring it to you. Oh, you back? Well, come on, let's go. These are ball players too. So it's like I said, it's just, at that point, it's just, I'm not sure what it's for. And if he comes back 100%, say, yo, I can give it a go, I'm going to be myself, then cool. Go give it a shot. Who am I to tell you not to? But I just think if you come back within this week or next, that gives you about a month between the end of this month and the first 2 weeks of April before the playoffs start, and I feel more confident. Anything below that, then you're playing with time. And at that point, I'm not sure if time is on his side or the Spurs side to be able to get it together, gel in time for them to make to be a legit threat in the playoffs. Now, he could very well come back and they can get that first round mixed with the rest of the season. Rest of the season could be his time to gel. But you're talking about going into the playoffs, still not where you're supposed to be. And, that's what an 82-game schedule is for. So you can get it together through 82 games. And so by the time April rolls around, you're playing your best basketball. You know who you are at that point, and you're entering the playoffs. At that point, I don't think the Spurs will still know who they are, with Kawhi Leonard just half back. So like I said, between this week and next week, that's what I'm looking for. And I hope, for the sake of basketball, not for the Spurs, not for anybody, for basketball, that you have a healthy Kawhi Leonard back. Because with a healthy Kawhi Leonard back and he's gelling, I think it makes for a much more interesting Western Conference race to get out of it and get to the finals.
All right, and that's all she wrote. I think our time of possession for talking Kawhi Leonard on this episode has hit.
Listen, man, people can't never hear enough of Kawhi. They will talk Kawhi until they're blue in the face. You can't hear enough.
That's why we got the time of possession for Kawhi. I mean, that's why I instituted that. So we got plenty of time. Now I want to make sure that we got a lot of questions from Facebook, our Spurs Nation Facebook and Twitter page. Of course, time now for our fans Q&A session from listeners and readers, once again submitted via social media. So number one, Jabari, do you think Jaron Blossomgame, a G League prospect, will be added to the San Antonio roster next year?
Wow. Jaron Blossomgame entering the podcast. Man, he must be blowing up. I think he's going to have an opportunity. I think obviously a lot is going to depend on how comfortable the Spurs are, where they at roster-wise. They got a lot of interesting things that can happen over the summer. And then I think a lot's going to depend on, contracts. And, I mean, he might be one of those young guys who you might need on that bench because you might lose some people. Because you remember something, Kawhi Leonard is going to be eligible for an extension. LaMarcus Aldridge just signed a big extension. Tony Parker, you got to take care of him. He's going to be a free agent. Rudy Gay, if he decides to opt out and says, you know what, I want to test the market again, see if I can get some more money, what are you going to do with him? And it's the one thing the Spurs don't do. They don't really go over the salary cap. That's not really their MO. They kind of make sure that they're, financially responsible. And so this might be one of those young guys where, you need a body. Kyle Anderson, what are you going to do with him? I mean, is he a guy that is in the Spurs' future? Does he want to be in the Spurs' future? I think that a lot's going to depend on the off-season moves. So I think obviously you're going to see another season of the off-season of Jaron Blossomgame. He's going to go over to Summer League, more than likely, take his chances there, and see how it unfolds from there. But at the same time, if you're Jaron Blossomgame too, and I respect this guy because he's decided to take less money to try to develop with the Spurs. But guess what? At one point, you have to understand something, that you have a family to feed too. He's only making $25,000 up there in Austin, with the G League. And so at some point, you're going to have to ask yourself, listen, I took a year, I developed, and, I feel like I got better, if he's given a serious opportunity to make the roster, then I think that's all he can ask for. But at that point, too, remember, like I said before, there's going to be other people calling. There's going to be other, overseas opportunities calling. Now, I know the Spurs still have his rights, so he can't necessarily come and sign with a team, in the NBA, but those overseas dollars, man, they might be calling him, and and nobody can fault him if he decides to take that route. But again, I think he'll be given an opportunity to. A lot's going to depend on how he makes out in the summertime. Remember, Brent Forbes turned that summer last season into off-season into a wonderful one for him, and it only carried over into this year, and he's having a pretty good season so far. If you compare it to what happened last year. So I think if Jaron Blossomgame can go have some productive, stints in Utah and Vegas, and shows them that, listen, I've learned a lot in Austin. I think I'm ready for that, opportunity to earn a roster spot. Then I think they'll bring him and they'll give him that opportunity. And if not, then maybe he'll go back up in Austin for another year. So, but it's going to also depend, like I said, on his financial status and where he's at and where he wants to go. So I like Jaron Blossomgame. I think he has a good future. I think he's a great one of those guys who is going to be a role player, a defensive-minded guy, somebody who's very versatile, can rebound, and really good in transition. So, we'll see. We'll see. I will say right now that it's unlikely, but I think he'll be given every opportunity. And if that's what he's going to be given, then it's going to be up to him at that point.
All right, moving along, Jabari. Let's talk about something you kind of touched on already, but, we got the question. Let's take a listen. Yeah. What will the Spurs do if they fall to 7th or 8th place, face defeat, or make history? You talked about how they got a little bit lucky that they're just in 6th now.
If they fall to 7th and 8th or 8th by the time the season wraps up, I I think you, first of all, you look at the fans and you thank them for being there, and you thank them for the support that they've shown this team over the last months, and since October when the season rolled around. And you go and just try to play your best basketball. The odds will be against you because at that point you will have a first-round matchup against the Houston Rockets or the Golden State Warriors. You do not want Golden State in the first round. I think you'll take your chances with Houston because, it's still a 7-game series. It's still Greg Popovich going up against Mike D'Antoni, but Houston's going to be tough. They can score with the best of them. And if the Spurs can't score, then good night. But, they're going to be tough. They're going to be if you play Houston or Golden State in the first round, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Now, if you get past them in the first round, then I think the finals becomes the road to the finals is a little bit more interesting. But at that point, nobody's going to think that you're going to win that series. And so at that point, you're going to be going up against you're the underdogs, and you just play like it, and you just say, hey. We're not expected to win. The pressure's on Houston and the pressure's on Golden State to knock us out in the first round because, if we even get them to a game 6, we got them on the ropes. So, like I said, you just got to go play your best basketball, play like an underdog, play like you have nothing to lose, and, possibly prepare yourself for an off season. And if not, if you happen to pull it off and get past them, then it'll be very interesting for the Spurs because at that point, if you get past Houston or Golden State, at that point, man, it's like, hey, we might can do this. We might can shock the world, So that first round is going to be interesting if they fall that low. And even if they fall to 6, it's still going to be tough because at that point you don't have home court advantage. And, so if you're the Spurs, you got to try to get back to that 3rd or 4th seed. Anything below 4, you don't have home court. And, you're facing an uphill battle because no matter what happens, even if it's against a young team like a Portland, if you get them to a Game 7, you got to go to their building for that Game 7. And Game 7 on somebody else's home court, they're hard to win, And so, the odds will be against you. But, again, like I said, you don't want to fall that far. That's why it's important for the Spurs to take care of business for the rest of the month and not lollygag around. You got a team on the ropes, knock them out. 4th quarter, stop playing, take care of business, execute. Do what you've been doing all season. Let that defense show. Get stops. Make buckets. Make plays. Get this thing over. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. Nobody said it's going to be easy, but you got to take care of business. You're on your home court. Now go do it.
This next question, Jabari, I really like. I like strategy, whether or not it's sports or finance or anything. I like kind of the story behind the story. So should we honestly think about tanking? Getting a favorable draft pick is way, I think 5 A's there, way better than getting bounced out the playoffs in the first round. What do you think about that?
Nah, man, I've never been against tanking. And I know everybody around here in San Antonio is thinking that. It's so crazy how people go from championship expectations to tanking. Like that's been like this question. Hey, should we just tank and just get a good draft pick? Well, let's say you do that. The Spurs still don't have good odds to get a top 5 pick. They're going to be picking from anywhere from, 10 to 15 or something like that. So it's like, yeah, you'll move up in the draft, but at the same time, I don't know how much of a difference a young guy coming in here is going to make because unless he's the number 1 pick or number 2 pick, the Spurs are going to develop him the same way that they develop everybody else. Look how long it took Kawhi Leonard to develop him. They moved up and they traded to get him. And it took him some years to get on that, to get to that level. So, it's still going to be a development process. They don't rush development. Everybody's not as polished as Tim Duncan coming out of college, especially these days where guys don't even spend 4 years in college anymore. So no, I think you play and you give the fans what their money's worth for the rest of the season. You play hard, and I think that they will, and you roll the dice and live with the results, and go into this offseason trying to repair any relationship damage that you've done with your franchise player in Kawhi Leonard. And you guys, they have to sit in the room. And like I said, I don't necessarily know if the tension is there as far as relationship damage overall, or if it's just, hey, it was 2 camps that was really, really frustrated that Kawhi Leonard wasn't on the court. But if it's the former, then I think you have to, if there is any damage that needs to be repaired, you do that first, and let him know that he's in for the long haul. And at that point, like I said, you just deal with the offseason. But you don't tank. You don't lose games and waste fans' money. because people are still paying to see you play, and you owe them. You're obligated to them to go out, and you're obligated to them to perform to the best of your capabilities and try to win basketball games in front of your home crowd. And I think if you do that and live with the results, then I think people can't get mad.
Yeah, that's a hard sell, like sitting in the crowd and being like, oh, we're getting killed, but boy, we can have a great pick next season.
I'm not paying my money to see you lose, okay?
This hot dog's fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, okay? Unless you're saying, hey, pay for a ticket, okay, and all the concessions is on us, then all right, cool. Because at that point, maybe it's even Steven. I don't care what happens. I get to drink beer, eat hot dogs, and watch a pro sports game, but people are still paying their hard-earned money. They're paying $20 a part. They're paying $50 damn near to enjoy refreshments and concessions at the stands. Okay.
Oh yeah, it's no simple $20 or $30 fare. It is expensive.
This is like a $200. This is like a $200 bang. Don't ask people, especially working class people, to spend their hard-earned money to watch you tank. Don't do it. It's not fair to them. Not when you're bringing in millions of dollars. Not when the players on the floors are bringing in millions of dollars. Not when they get to hop in their nice cars and go to their nice homes, where these people are sitting up here working to see you play, to bring in their kids here and entertain and try to have a family night so they can see you lose. Hell no. No.
All right. Well,
and if you're
I
taking
feel like we've opened Pandora's
back.
box here. I thought it was a funny question, but I retract. This was not my question. I thought it was a good question, but you've proven. I think you've won the argument here. Yeah,
it's a very good question. It's a good question because there are people out there who actually think that that's an option. I just disagree. I don't think. Now, people might say, "Oh, well, they might bring a different point." I just don't think that's fair. You can't ask people to pay all of this money only to see you lose and know that, hey, we're trying to tank. That's not fair.
Yeah, especially don't tell them you're trying to tank. Do it under the table tank if it must be done.
Yeah, well, ain't nobody stupid, though. They going to realize it.
They might realize,
you know what? Something don't look right. 5 players resting? No, this don't feel right. Give me my money back.
We just got a few moments left, Jabari. That the last one was good, though. I'm glad we ran long on that. Let's combine the last 2 questions here. They're kind of similar. So the first of the 2, how is the atmosphere around the team? And then the second one, does the adversity this team has experienced make the team stronger or weaker? Do they learn from collapses, or does it become muscle memory?
Something I think, to answer that first question, first of all, the atmosphere around it, I haven't sensed that guys have given up. I haven't sensed that, I still think that guys are still trying to make the best of the season. I still think that they listen, you know what? If we can just get our guys back on the court, if we can get whole.
It wasn't too long ago that they beat the Cavaliers.
You're right. If we can get whole, before the playoffs and we can get some things going and we can get on a little streak and we can get some continuity, we could gel, we still can do this thing. And I think that's the vibe that I'm getting. Guys are not giving up yet. They haven't sitting up here and start making summer vacation plans after April saying, hey, we're a first-round team. We out of here. I'm going on a cruise after this. It hasn't gotten to that point yet. And if it is, make no mistake, I would definitely tell you. But it's still that feeling of we can do it. We just got to get whole, and we have to stop getting injured. And, we think we'll be fine. As far as the adversity, I think guys are learning from it. Rudy Gay said something interesting after that loss against the I think it was the New Orleans Pelicans. And he said, we still feel good because, we still feel like we have an advantage because nobody knows who we are. We don't even know who we are. So at any given moment, anybody can step up and have a big night. Not only that, when we get our guys back, then, now we have a whole bunch of guys who got experience. We got who've got that game time in them, that action. We can do this. You know what I mean? And you don't know who we are. So I still think that they're overcoming adversity. They're trying to stay strong. And it's hard. It's hard because, players want to win, especially on this team, because you have a lot of vets who've been there. They've done it. They understand what it takes, and they're not used to this. Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, those guys who've been around for a long time, they're not really used to something like this where you go through a whole season and it's still not together by March. And this is the time the Spurs expected to have it together after that rodeo road trip. This is the time that they've been playing some of their best basketball over the years, and they still are on this thing where they're still not there yet. And in fact, they're slipping, and so this is a very uncharted territory for them. But, credit to those players, credit to the young guys who are doing a good job at staying focused and using that energy. I think DeJounte Murray through this whole stretch, man, has been phenomenal. There have been key points in the game that he's just shown that leadership. And he's shown that fire, that passion. Like, listen, we're still in this thing. Stop giving up. He looked at Pau Gasol in the era one day, man, and hit Pau Gasol in the chest and you know, and kind of clapped his hand and, yo, come on, let's go. You know what I mean? Come on, man, let's snap out of it. And when you see stuff like that, you like, yo, he's in it. He's in it. He wants to win. He knows this season ain't over yet. He's in it. And I think those are the things that people miss. You might see the stats. You may see him have a turnover, but you miss those moments where that leadership is being developed. And I think overall, over the long haul, over the long term, over his career, times like this, moments like this, only going to help him become a better player. And so I think when you still see stuff like that, you know that even if this isn't the Spurs year, and it may not look like it right now, over the next few years, moments like this are going to come back, and you're going to say, man, that year helped him. It helped these players. It helped Davis Bertans. It helped Brent Forbes. It helped DeJounte Murray. It helped Derek White. It helped those young guys to be better pros. And so you got to also snap out this year and look and say, you know what? The long haul, this is going to help. May not do this year, but it's going to help. But still, you still see that fire that they want to win. And as a journalist, as somebody looking at it from an objective point of view, you salute that and you say, you know what? That has to be applauded. It has to be.
San Antonio Express News Spurs beat reporter Jabari Young looking at the Spurs in an objective manner. I like that. As always, Jabari, great to have you on the show. I'm hesitant to say glass half full here because of everything we just discussed. Maybe like glass quarter full is the best that we could get here. But you made the case, you know, if certain things happen, you know, in the near future,
man,
maybe a better story. Yeah,
it's still time, man. You know, still time.
All right. Well, we will have more time to discuss this. So big thanks to Jabari Young. We'll talk next week. Have a good week, man.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
And thanks again to San Antonio Express News Spurs beat reporter Jabari Young for joining me for today's episode of the Spurs Insider, a weekly NBA podcast from expressnews.com, brought to you today by the law offices of Thomas J. Henry. For expressnews.com, I'm Chance Dorland.